Those who convicted me are now in the headlines. But this time I have the pen. My name is Michael Alton. I am 77 years old. I used to be a senior investigative journalist at the Washington Post. My job was to expose the dirty side of the system. But the bad thing is, sometimes that dirt gets on your closest friends. In 1982, everything changed with a single story. I was working on a corruption case involving the highest-ranking officials in the government, with 3 others, David, Carl, and Robert, men I had worked with and considered friends at the time. Then one morning, the FBI raided my home, leaking state secrets, espionage, threatening public safety. The charges were ready, and the worst part was, the witness statements supporting them were ready too. Do you know who wrote them? David, Carl, Robert. Overnight, I became a traitor to my country. My career was over, my name was tarnished. I spent 12 years in the Colorado Federal Prison, and no one looked back. But there, in the corner of my cell, I kept a notebook. No one read it, but I wrote every night. When I first entered prison, they locked up not only my body, but also my voice. It was as if they wanted me to drown in the sound of loneliness. For the first few months, I only talked to the walls. Every night, the same dream, the same scream, the same eyes. David's, Carl's, Robert's. But I realized something. If a person endures pain long enough, pain becomes a driving force. Revenge is like that too. It's not about eating cold food. It's like poison accumulating drop by drop. And when mixed with patience, that's when it truly becomes powerful. The first winter in prison, the ceiling was leaking, my bed was rusty, and I found an old notebook. A notebook with burnt edges and crumpled pages. That notebook was the beginning of everything. I didn't just write my feelings in it. I wrote about anger, betrayal, but most of all, evidence. Who said what and when? At what hour that night was I betrayed? What document did the FBI bring? What email did the prosecutor rely on? Who remained silent in the newspaper? Who slipped away behind my back supposedly quietly? I noted it all down, date by date, name by name, breath by breath. And I knew one day these lines would become a weapon, but not with gunpowder, with ink. While I was rotting inside every day, they were shining outside. David Miller became a media tycoon. News channels, digital platforms, CEO chairs. He gave interviews frequently. He lectured on press freedom. Isn't that ironic? The man who silenced me gave TED Talks on freedom of expression. Carl Benjamin. He became the president of one of the most powerful think tanks in Washington. He dined with White House advisors every week. A foundation was established in his name. He gave scholarships to students. We are raising the leaders of the future, he would say, as if stealing my future wasn't enough. And Robert Lane, he advised the vice president on the path to the Senate. He would give speeches about justice in front of the cameras, yet his lies were in my court transcripts. The sentence that destroyed me, in his own words, still echoes in my ears. Michael fabricated the documents. We had nothing to do with it. So from that day on, I watched every one of their rises. Every television appearance, every award ceremony, every headline. But I didn't say a single word. I remained silent. Because sometimes silence leaves a deeper mark than shouting. And those marks, one day find their way back. But I wasn't alone. My son Ethan, he hadn't forgotten anything. Even as a child, he noticed the anger in my eyes. He would ask questions. Dad, why doesn't anyone call you? Dad, why can't you appear on TV? I swallowed every time. I couldn't say it, but the day came. I gave him the notebook. I took it out of the dusty box and placed it on the table. I only said this. This is not just a memory. It's a map, the path leading to where justice is buried. And that day, Ethan's eyes changed. Childhood gave way to determination. Because now he understood, too. This wasn't just my revenge. It was the honor of our surname. Evening when I gave my son Ethan the notebook, the house was quiet. But there was such a commotion inside us. It was as if years of resentment were screaming at once. He turned the pages of the notebook one by one. With every sentence he read, he sat up a little straighter and fell a little more silent. At one point, his eyes filled with tears. He was on a page dated 1983. It was the notes from the day I was arrested. At that moment, he lifted his head and asked only this: "Are they still free?" My answer was simple and clear: "Not yet." At that moment, I understood. My son had taken on my cause, and I would take revenge not with my own hands, but with the conscience of the next generation. The plan did not start immediately, because we did not work in panic like them, but in silence. This revenge was not a sudden explosion. It was a trap set step by step. Our first task was to transfer the records in the notebook to a digital format. Audio recordings, document samples, dated notes, all were encrypted and stored in a special database Ethan had set up. Every piece of data was a bullet, but we hadn't pulled the trigger yet. Ethan, on the surface, opened a small publishing house in New York. An ordinary boutique publishing house. A few poetry books, a few local novels. But behind the scenes, a single book was being prepared that would never be displayed on the shelves of that publishing house. Truth in Silence. The Truth in Silence. There was no author's name. We didn't even put a name on the cover. Just a date. 1983, 2023. Inside, every line was aimed at the target. David's forged signatures. Carl's covered-up funds. Robert's lobbying connections. Name by name, document by document, witness by witness. But this book couldn't simply be released into the market, because our target wasn't the shelves. It was the headlines. Ethan prepared a 6-month media plan before the book's release. He created secret email chains. Anonymous documents were leaked to major journalists, academics, and researchers. All small pieces, but they would all come together in the book. We didn't catch them off guard. We made them off guard. And that morning came. Digital copies of the book were sent to the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and all major media outlets, with a single headline: "He remained silent for 40 years. Now it's your turn to speak." Within an hour, social media was ablaze. The Truth in Silence hashtag trended worldwide on Twitter. Are these documents real? Who is David Miller? Is Carl Benjamin's foundation being shut down? Why is Senator's advisor Robert Lane nowhere to be found? The system began to panic, but it was too late, because this story was no longer in their hands. We were now the narrators, and we would write the final chapter of this story. After the book was published, the first to fall was the one who stood at the top. David Miller, the golden boy of American media, CEO of a publishing group. But now his name was no longer on the screen, it was in the headlines. That morning, as he watched the news about him on CNN, his face froze. Ethan showed me the slow-motion replay. I had written headlines for years, but that day he made the headline himself. David Miller, allegations of forged. Documents from 1983 in the spotlight. Old signatures, covered-up payments, false statements made during testimony. It was all in the books, and now it was in the court records. 3 days later, an investigation into tax, evasion, and fraud was launched against the think tank founded by Carl Benjamin. That night, the FBI raided their offices. Then all the sponsors withdrew. The investigation launched against him was like a ledger that was 40 years overdue. But this time we didn't wield the pen. We just opened the cover. The final link, Robert Lane, Senate advisor, a mask polished in the public eye as an honest statesman. But we didn't remove the mask. We forced him to take it off himself. When he was summoned to the Senate Special Committee, he took the oath at the podium, just like he did 40 years ago when he stood before me. But this time the roles had reversed. While he remained silent, I was in the back row. Ethan was beside me, notebook in hand. Our turn came, and Ethan began to speak. Mr. President, the documents we present here are pieces of a truth my father carried for 40 years. This is not just a personal case. This is a testament to how late justice can come. The room fell silent. Only the cameras turned, the pens wrote, the eyes widened. Robert's hands were shaking. I watched silently, because sometimes revenge is not taken by shouting, but by sitting silently. Finally, the court began the formal process. David apologized to the public and resigned. Carl went bankrupt due to tax penalties. Robert was completely erased from political life. But for us, the real victory was not the headlines, but the restoration of our surname. My son cleared my name, and I finally spoke out loud. I remained silent for 40 years. Now it's your turn to speak, under oath, if you've made it this far. This isn't just a story. This is the voice of the silent, the past that the slanderers have forgotten, and the true power of justice, which has finally found its place, albeit belatedly. What about you? Do you think justice is really late? Do you think someone who remains silent can one day change everything? Write in the comments. What do you think about this silent reckoning? If it were you, would you speak up even 40 years later? And if you're interested in this kind of cool-headed, strategic and emotional reckoning story, subscribe, turn on notifications, because what's shared on this channel isn't just a story. Sometimes it could be someone's real past.